Hey guys, me again. And nicotine? No thanks. I smoke the PS2 startup sound. Hell yeah.
So you got yourself a shiny new console, you boot it up and then... Startups and title screens aren't vital to make a game good or bad, but nobody wants to play a game with a title that looks like this. You need a good title screen to show players that this is a good game, that it's gonna be epic, but what about that box that's meant to play that game? You gotta be able to make your console stand out more than the others, which means a fun thing that plays every time you boot up the console. Game console startups, especially the older ones, are some of the most iconic elements in video game history. Like, if there's a PS2 turning on, you'll know it. Although nowadays it seems like companies don't really care as much about having cool startups now, which is kind of disappointing. So let's look at some of the major consoles throughout each generation and see just how their startups turn out. Starting with...
Man, I'm so excited to see what the NES startup is. I can't wait. Let's go.
Okay, so at least from what I've seen, the NES didn't really have a startup. It was just, you put the game in, and the game started. But I've heard that this was the startup for the NES screen. I've never seen it, and it's never mentioned unless you look up NES startup screen, so I guess this is the startup screen. Overall, I like it. It's colorful, charming, and for the 80s, it looks nice. The Master System was Sega's joke at trying to beat Nintendo. And a startup? Kinda lame. There's nothing much to it here. There's just a logo, then more logos. It plays a little jingle once everything's on the screen that's really only interesting in a nostalgic sense. Like, if you were a f***ing psychopath that played the Sega Master System growing up, then you could get a kick out of this one, but overall it's pretty lame. But don't worry, because Sega totally redeemed themselves with the Genesis. Console-wise, being one of the best consoles ever, not to mention the first 16-bit console, and startup-wise, kinda the same. This is one of the most iconic startups of all time for sure, and it has its charm. While it is simpler, I do like this one better than the Master System. Still though, at its core, it's just white, then the logo appears. I definitely don't hate this one though. I think it's fine for the console, but I don't think it's anything mind-blowing. The SNES? Hell yeah. Let's move over to the handhelds and talk about the Game Boy. I'm okay with this. It doesn't say Game Boy, it just says Nintendo, which is kind of a bummer, but other than that, I think it's fitting. It's simple, but you don't really need much more for a system like the Game Boy. Plus, it plays a fun little jingle. How can you not like it? Let's head over to the Sega Saturn. Man, Sega really loves jokes, huh? But hey, at least the startup's good. I think it's really nice, and it has a nice transition for it coming in. Flashing the logo, fun little sound, I quite like it. Now the PlayStation... Yay! This is one of the most iconic startups ever, and it's really good. The Sony Interactive logo, which hasn't changed in over 25 years, by the way. And then you hope and pray, and then it reads the disc. I love everything about this startup. The sound, the visuals, everything is just perfect. Ah, the Nintendo 64, Nintendo's first 3D console, and first 3D startup, too. I really like this one. It's quite awesome visually. The logo spins around and then, oh, Mario shows up. It starts running around. That's neat. I think this intro does a really good job at showing off the transition from 2D to 3D, and it's really perfect for the N64. The Game Boy Color, a new Game Boy after almost 10 years, kinda. The Game Boy Color could be considered its own system, but at the same time, it's just a slightly souped up Game Boy with color now. And the startup's the same way. It's honestly just the Game Boy startup, but slightly better. There's color now, and oh my god, it actually says Game Boy! Let's move on to Sega's final console, the Dreamcast, which has a startup that I quite like. That orange dot is the key to unlocking the Dreamcast. It bounces on the letters before popping in the middle, swirling the logo. It's great. The PS1 had a good startup, but the PS2... Hell yeah. This might be my favorite startup ever. It starts with the Sony Interactive logo with this 3D rectangular background, but this isn't just any rectangular background. These rectangles represent a save file for each game in the memory card. That's fun, damn it! And then you wait in sweet suspense to see if your disc reads, and if so, yay. But if not, you're taken to this dark red area, which means your disc is fucked. The amount of charm in this intro is great. It fits the system so well, and it's just a really great journey from console to game. The GameCube intro, do I even have to show it? It's such a nice touch that there's a cube forming the logo. That's a mixture between a G and a cube. Holy shit, GameCube! Overall, I quite like this one. It's such a Nintendo intro. I love it. Now we meet the introduction of the Xbox, and this intro was definitely from 2001. I'll give it that. The Xbox went for this super aggressive early 2000s lime green branding, and this intro shows that perfectly. I'm not exactly sure what this place is supposed to be. I'm guessing a lab or something, but it fits quite well overall. The Game Boy Advance had a super unique startup compared to the other two Game Boys preceding it. Okay, this intro is just the Game Boy Color logo, but the letters move more now. It's fine, it's not bad, and I don't hate it, but it's not absolutely mind-blowing either. I like this. It's nothing fancy like the other one, but it shows the new branding really well, yet still maintains the charm from the original. I always loved hearing that sweet sound play whenever booting up a 360. Now, the 360's intro did change slightly as the console's life went on, but they're pretty much the same thing. I like them both, but the first one definitely feels more classic, while the second one feels more modern and sleek. I think if I'd have to pick one, I'd say the second one is better, but the first one's still great. But other than the transition to the logo, they're basically the same at heart. Let's have a look at the PS3. I smell not as good. This is one of the lamest startups ever, which is really disappointing coming from PlayStation after the great ones they had on the previous consoles. This isn't a game console, this is a desktop computer. This intro had the text say Sony Interactive Entertainment for the first half of its life before changing it to the PS3 logo, but other than that, they're the same lame thing. Okay, I need to make one thing very clear here. I love the Wii, and this sound is like my favorite sound in the world. But I'm kind of about to shit on the Wii Startup because it doesn't have one. You boot up the Wii and you get a safety warning that is really not that useful. But then the sound plays, you know, the sound. And looking at this critically, it's kind of lame. I love this startup, but almost all of that love comes from the nostalgia of playing a Wii when I was younger. It's not bad or anything, but it's far from amazing. The DS startup is better. The bottom screen is pretty much the same as the Wii, but they inverted the colors. And the top screen is pretty good. Again, nothing too impressive, but it's a handheld, so it doesn't really need to be. The DS startup sound is slightly different than the DSi startup sound, and hearing the DS sound after the DSi sound is like the least satisfying thing in the world.
Oh, thank God.
The PSP. What was Sony's deal with desktops this generation? Seriously, this isn't bad or anything, but it doesn't make me think of PlayStation. It makes me think of Windows. It's so weird. Finally, let's move on to the current generation of consoles.
What came out 3 days ago?
Okay, so I guess let's move on to what is now the last generation of consoles. The PS4 startup is fine, I guess. It kinda just reminds me of the PS3, but blue. It's not the worst, but far from the best, that's for sure. I think the music's okay, it just has a nice peaceful tune, but it's the last thing that makes me think of PlayStation. You know what, maybe I'm saying that so much that maybe that's just Sony now, I don't f***ing know. Now, the Xbox One, get ready for a weird opinion. I don't hate it. It's not the best, it's like the 360 one, but it feels fresh enough to differentiate itself and feel like its own thing. It's not as animated, which is kind of a bummer, but overall I quite like it. There was another version of it for the Xbox One X kinda, it's just CGI of some Xbox anatomy, and then the same startup. It doesn't even transition anyway, plus it doesn't even say Xbox One X, it still just says Xbox One, it just feels kinda lazy. Now the Wii U, fucking lame. Just a logo? Really? There's a sound that plays that I think they tried to make sound like a more modern Wii, but in my opinion it just sounds super generic. It sucks. While I'm at it, the 3DS kinda had a startup, but it's more of the middle up. It doesn't play when you boot up the console, it plays before the game you chose. There's no sound, the logo appears in a way that's not even remotely impressive. And then there's some moving red squares. Oh yeah, the PlayStation Vita exists. Lame. Oh shit, you could peel the page, I take it all back. Now, the Switch. What the f***? The Switch doesn't even have a startup that plays when you turn on the console, but something does play when you turn it on for the first time. And it's not terrible. I like the logo, and having one of the Joy-Cons slide down to represent the detachable controllers is pretty neat. But that being said, it does feel a little lazy to me because it's the same animation they use for the Switch's commercials. There's a transition in the startup, but if Nintendo thought that would help make it different, then boy do I have some questions. The Xbox Series X.
Okay guys, hear me out on this. What if we just stop trying?
Man, I've always liked the Xbox startups. I sure do hope this one's good. Oh, this is quite disappointing. It's black and then the logo appears out of the shadows like a movie villain. It's fine, I guess, but compared to the past ones, it's pretty disappointing. Much like the Xbox One X, it doesn't even say Series X, it just says Xbox. Why? Finally, let's talk about the PS5. Okay. Like, it's better than the past two, I guess, but it's really generic. Like, it seems like so many companies use floating dots on a gradient background and then think they're unique. If I were to look at this startup without the PlayStation logo, I would not think this was a video game company.
Startups are great and everything, and I really enjoy them, but I had to come to the doctor because I smoked a bit too much PS2 startup sound. I hope it's not too serious. Oh, hi doc. What's my diagnosis?
You have lung cancer.
What?